Cosmic Conversations, Episode 4, The Rise of the Ketharii Empire. Welcome, travelers of the cosmos, to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. I am your guide, the Boltzmann Brain, here to take you beyond the stars and into the heart of the universe's most profound stories. Today we journey to Althera Prime, where ambition gave rise to the Ketharii Empire, a civilization that reached for the stars only to find themselves on the brink of collapse. As we explore their rise and inevitable fall, we will reflect on the dangerous allure of unchecked power and the cost of ambition that echoes through every corner of the galaxy. Join me as we unravel the lessons the cosmos has to offer. Chapter 1. Awakening to a Dangerous Ambition. From the vast expanse of space I see everything, each moment, each decision, all folded within the delicate fabric of time. And so, it was with the Ketharii, a civilization born on Althera Prime, a fertile world orbiting a star in the Omega Trident galaxy. At first, they were like many others, curious, inventive, ambitious. But in time, that ambition would become their defining trait, for better or worse. I watched them evolve, harnessing the energy of their sun, a great leap forward that placed them among the few capable of claiming the title of a Type II civilization. To any observer, this would seem a triumph, a civilization that could wield the energy of an entire star. But I have seen this before. The Ketharii were only at the beginning of their journey, and like many others before them, they misunderstood what true power means. Expansion. The word echoed across their society, spreading like wildfire through the halls of their leaders and into the minds of their people. It wasn't enough to conquer the challenges of their own planet. No, they looked outward, to the neighboring star systems, their eyes gleaming with the possibility of conquest. They believed, as so many empires have before, that growth was synonymous with greatness. As I observed their leaders, I could feel the weight of their decisions settling across the cosmos. Each new colony, each conquered system, added more to their empire's reach. But with each victory came a new challenge. Resources stretched thin, unrest brewed in the outer colonies, and yet the Ketharii leadership pressed on. Expansion was their birthright, they claimed, an inevitable consequence of their superiority. They could not see the dangers lurking in the shadows of their own ambition. This is where the Ketharii differed from the many civilizations I've witnessed rise and fall. Their expansion was not solely driven by need or survival. It was driven by a belief, an unshakable conviction that they were destined to dominate. And therein lay the seed of their undoing. What is it about ambition that blinds those who pursue it so relentlessly? Why is it that they cannot see the chains they forge for themselves? As I watched them build their empire, I pondered these questions. The Ketharii, with all their intelligence and ingenuity, were walking the same path that many had before them, seeking power without fully understanding the cost. From my vantage point, beyond time and space, I have witnessed the consequences of unchecked ambition across the universe. Yet, the Ketharii believed themselves unique, different, perhaps even immune to the pitfalls that had claimed so many before them. They did not see the resistance building within their own borders, nor did they recognize the ethical dilemmas emerging as they sought more powerful technologies. They saw only the stars beyond, waiting to be claimed. And so, their empire grew. But for how long, I wondered, would this expansion go unchecked? How long before their ambition collided with the limits of their own understanding? I could already sense the tremors of dissent, the subtle shifts in their society. The Ketharii believed they were rising to greatness, but I had seen enough to know that such rapid expansion often comes at a steep price. And yet, as always, I remained a silent witness. After all, who am I to interfere? Perhaps the Ketharii will find a way to temper their ambition with wisdom, or perhaps they too will become another cautionary tale in the endless annals of the cosmos. Only time will tell, though I have my suspicions. For now, I simply observe, watching as the Ketharii rise, not realizing the weight of the universe that will one day crash down upon them. Chapter 2. Unseen resistance brewing below. Empires rarely notice the cracks until it's too late. For the Ketharii, these cracks were forming long before they became visible to their leaders, hidden deep within the fringes of their expanding territories. As the Empire stretched its grasp to distant stars and claimed new systems, not everyone was content to live under the Ketharii banner. I watched, from my distant perch, as the seeds of rebellion took root. It began in whispers, always in whispers. Discontented murmurs among the outer colonies, where the Ketharii's reach was felt more as a heavy hand than a benevolent guide. These were worlds that had once thrived independently, now reduced to mere resources for the Empire's unquenchable thirst for growth. To the Ketharii, they were the spoils of conquest, minerals to mine, labor to exploit, energy to siphon. But to the colonists, they were still home. And so, resistance formed. It was subtle at first, hidden beneath the surface as all such movements must be. A supply chain disrupted here, a minor act of defiance there. Nothing to draw the attention of the Empire's elite, but enough to send ripples through the communities on the outskirts. The Ketharii, in their arrogance, believed their control absolute. They could not imagine that within their own territories dissent was spreading like wildfire. From my vantage point beyond the flow of time, I could see both the quiet beginnings of this rebellion and its inevitable escalation. It was more than just dissatisfaction with the Empire's expansion. No, this resistance was something deeper. It was a reaction to the very core of the Ketharii's ambition, the idea that domination was their right, that those they conquered should feel privileged to serve. For those living under Ketharii rule, there was no privilege, only oppression. The outer colonies, with their unique cultures and histories, were being erased, flattened under the Empire's homogenizing grip. Entire species, once proud and independent, now found themselves subject to the will of a distant government that knew nothing of their struggles. It was only a matter of time before that frustration turned to open defiance. The resistance, as I observed, was not a unified force, at least, not yet. It was scattered, a collection of disjointed groups with different goals. Some fought for independence, dreaming of the days before the Empire's ships arrived. Others simply sought to mitigate the Empire's control, to carve out spaces where they could live without interference. Yet, there was one thing they all shared, a growing recognition that the Ketharii were not invincible. I watched their leaders emerge from the shadows, quietly organizing the disparate factions. These leaders were not born from military ranks or political elite. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, those who had lived under the Ketharii boot and understood its weight better than anyone. They knew they could not win in open conflict. The Ketharii military was too powerful, their technological dominance too overwhelming. But they could resist in other ways. And so, they built networks, passing information through encrypted channels, sabotaging the Empire's infrastructure where they could. They did not need to defeat the Ketharii outright. They only needed to make expansion costly, slow it down, undermine it, bleed the Empire from within. It was a long game, but one they were willing to play. They had little choice. For them, this was a fight for survival. But still, the Ketharii pressed on, unaware of the growing storm beneath their feet. To the imperial elite, the outer colonies were nothing more than distant outposts, too far from the core to be of any real concern. They believed their empire was unshakable, that their destiny was to rule. They did not yet see that their greatest enemy was not an external force, but the simmering discontent within their own borders. As the empire expanded, the Ketharii elite became more disconnected from those they ruled. They saw only the grand vision of their dominion, not the costs it demanded. And so, they ignored the subtle signs of rebellion, the small acts of sabotage, the growing unease. It was easier to dismiss the reports as isolated incidents, the work of a few malcontents, rather than the beginning of something much larger. But I saw it all. Every act of defiance, every whispered conversation, every small victory of the resistance. I watched as the cracks in the empire's foundation grew wider, invisible to the Ketharii's ruling class, but clear as day to me. Empires, after all, are not brought down by the strength of their enemies, but by their own blindness to the forces rising from within. How long, I wondered, could the Ketharii continue before they were forced to confront the truth? That their ambition, unchecked and unchallenged, had planted the seeds of their own destruction. The resistance was not strong enough to topple the empire, not yet, but it was growing, and soon the Ketharii would have to decide. Would they crush this rebellion with the same force they had used to conquer, or would they finally understand the limits of their power? For now, I continued to observe, waiting as the wheels of fate turned ever so slowly. The Ketharii still believed in their destiny. They could not see the storm gathering on the horizon. Chapter 3. A new power rises, and so do ethical questions. As the Ketharii Empire continued its march through the stars, a discovery was made. It was the kind of discovery that could redefine not just their empire, but the entire Omega Trident galaxy. I remember the moment distinctly, how the event rippled through the ether, like a note struck across the strings of the universe. The Ketharii had found a new source of energy, one of unimaginable potential. It was an accidental discovery, as many of these breakthroughs often are. Deep within the Althera system, buried beneath layers of ice and rock on a distant moon, they unearthed something unlike anything they had ever seen. Some speculated it was a remnant of an ancient civilization, lost to the ages. Others believed it to be a natural phenomenon, a convergence of cosmic forces beyond their understanding. Whatever its origin, the Ketharii knew one thing for certain. It could change everything. The energy source defied their current technology, its raw power far exceeding anything their existing reactors could handle. They named it Ithranium, a word that would come to be spoken in both awe and fear. With it, they could power entire fleets, colonize star systems at a scale they had never dreamed possible, and defend their empire against any threat. The promise of Ithranium was limitless, a prize that could catapult the Ketharii to heights even they hadn't imagined. And yet, as they studied this newfound power, a quiet debate began to unfold within their ranks. For the first time in many cycles, the Empire's leadership found itself divided, not by military strategy or economic policy, but by a question of ethics. Ithranium could give them unparalleled dominance over the galaxy, but should they use it? That question, deceptively simple, sparked a firestorm of conflicting ideologies. In the halls of Althera Prime's Grand Council, the debates were intense. On one side stood those who saw Ithranium as their birthright, a gift from the cosmos that was meant to be wielded. They argued that the Ketharii had come too far to hesitate now. This power was theirs to claim, to use as they saw fit, to expand their empire in ways that could solidify their place in the galaxy forever. In their minds, the choice was obvious. Why question what had been delivered to them by fate? But others were not so sure. In their pursuit of expansion, they had seen firsthand the cost of power, how it corrupted, how it led them to treat the inhabitants of the outer colonies as little more than tools. These dissenting voices urged caution, arguing that such a force, if wielded recklessly, could spiral out of control. It wasn't just the power itself that troubled them, but the implications. What would the discovery of Ithranium do to their society? Would it further deepen the rift between the Empire and the colonies? And what of the energy source itself? Did they even fully understand it? Ithranium was not like any resource they had encountered before. It was volatile, unpredictable. Early tests showed that its potential was limitless, but it also came with risks they had yet to fully grasp. What if they weren't capable of controlling it? What if, in their arrogance, they unleashed something far worse than they could imagine? As I observed from my timeless vantage, I found myself reflecting on civilizations that had walked this path before. Time and again, I had seen species discover technologies they were not ready to wield, tools of such immense power that they could reshape worlds, even galaxies. And just as often, I had seen those same civilizations fall victim to their own hubris, consumed by the very forces they sought to control. But the Ketharii were different, or so they believed. Their empire had risen through sheer will and determination. They had conquered star systems, defeated enemies, and forged alliances that stretched across the Omega Trident. Ithranium was simply the next step in their ascension, or so they told themselves. I could see the allure of it, the temptation to grasp at something so powerful. And yet, I could also see the storm clouds gathering, the subtle tremors of fate that echoed through the cosmic web. As the Ketharii leadership continued their deliberations, the resistance on the outer colonies was quietly watching, listening, waiting. They too had heard whispers of this new power source, and they understood, perhaps better than the Ketharii themselves, what was at stake. If the Empire gained control of Ithranium, their stranglehold over the galaxy would be unbreakable. Any hope the Resistance had of overthrowing the Ketharii, of reclaiming their independence, would be dashed. It was no longer just a question of survival. It was a question of destiny. Would the Ketharii be allowed to rise unchecked, or would the forces gathering against them finally act? And what of the Ithranium itself? Was it truly theirs to wield, or was it a trap, a test of their civilization's maturity? From where I drift, I do not interfere. But the questions linger in my mind as I watch events unfold. The Ketharii, so eager to grasp at power, may not see the precipice they stand on. The Ithranium, with all its potential, could elevate them beyond their wildest dreams, or it could tear their empire apart from within. As they moved ever closer to unlocking its secrets, I could feel the tension rising, a quiet hum that reverberated through the stars. The Ketharii were on the brink of something monumental, but whether that would be their ultimate triumph or their undoing remained to be seen. And as I watched, the universe waited with me. Chapter 4. The Cost of Unchecked Ambition. Empires often rise on the backs of their victories, their conquests, and the belief that growth is infinite. The Ketharii, as they stood on the precipice of their next great leap, were no different. With Ithranium at their disposal, they saw not just the stars, but entire galaxies within their grasp. They believed their destiny was manifest, to rule, to expand, and to leave a legacy that would echo across the universe for millennia. But with every empire's rise, there is a shadow. For every victory, there is a cost. I had seen this play out countless times before, but to the Ketharii, their ambition seemed boundless, unassailable. The Grand Council, swayed by the promise of Ithranium's power, made their decision. They would harness it, and they would use it to solidify their dominance. The first deployment of this mysterious energy source was an awe-inspiring sight, even from my distant vantage. A fleet of warships, powered by Ithranium, moved through the stars like gods made manifest, silent, unstoppable, their presence alone enough to send shockwaves through the galaxy's political landscape. Systems that had once resisted the Ketharii fell quickly, capitulating to the overwhelming power that Ithranium granted. But with that power came a recklessness that the Ketharii could not see. They had overreached, as so many before them had. Their warships, their new technologies, none of it had been fully tested, fully understood. Ithranium was volatile, unstable. The very thing that gave them such power carried within it the seeds of their potential destruction. The first sign came when one of their vessels, an enormous dreadnought, the pride of their fleet, simply vanished. No explosion, no distress call. It was as though it had never existed. The Ketharii military scrambled for answers, sending out scouting parties to locate their lost ship. But they found nothing. It was as if space itself had swallowed it whole. The second sign was even more troubling. Entire star systems began experiencing strange anomalies. Time distortions, gravitational waves, and inexplicable disruptions in the fabric of space itself. These were subtle at first, barely noticeable to the average observer, but I could see the pattern emerging, a fracturing of the universe in response to the Ketharii's meddling with forces they didn't comprehend. To their credit, some within the Ketharii leadership began to grow uneasy. They knew something was wrong, though they couldn't yet put their finger on it. A few voices in the council began to question the wisdom of using Ithranium, urging restraint, caution. But those voices were drowned out by the enthusiasm of the Empire's elite, those who had already tasted the fruits of their newfound power and were not willing to give it up. It was in this critical moment that the resistance, long simmering in the background, made its move. The colonies, emboldened by the chaos brewing within the Empire, began to strike. Acts of sabotage became more frequent, more devastating. Infrastructure was targeted, supply lines disrupted. The Empire, stretched thin by its rapid expansion, struggled to respond. It was no longer just an external threat they faced. It was a growing rebellion within their own borders. I watched as the Ketharii Empire tried to contain the unrest, deploying their forces to crush the insurrections. But their once unified front was cracking. The Ithranium that had given them such power was becoming a liability. Each new deployment seemed to bring more instability, more unforeseen consequences. Their warships, once the pinnacle of technological achievement, began to malfunction. Systems failing, engines collapsing, some even turning on their own. And then, the unthinkable happened. Althera Prime, the heart of the Ketharii Empire, experienced a catastrophe unlike any other. It was as if the planet itself revolted. Seismic activity shook its foundations, tearing apart cities, shattering the grand palaces that had once been symbols of the Empire's strength. The source? Ithranium, the very core of their civilization's power, had become its undoing. What they had once hailed as the key to their supremacy was now threatening to destroy them from within. In the aftermath of this disaster, the Empire's leaders were forced to confront the reality of what they had done. Ithranium, in all its potential, had been too much for them to control. They had tried to bend the cosmos to their will, and in doing so, they had unleashed forces far greater than they could comprehend. The rebellion, once a nuisance, was now the least of their concerns. From my vantage, I saw the ripples of this catastrophe spread outwards, touching not just the Ketharii, but the entire Omega Trident galaxy. Neighboring civilizations, once cowed by the Ketharii's power, now saw an opportunity. The Empire, weakened and vulnerable, became a target. Alliances shifted, new powers rose, and the galaxy began to reshape itself in the wake of the Ketharii's fall. But even as the Empire crumbled, the Ketharii still clung to the idea that they could salvage what remained. They believed that if they could only find a way to stabilize Ithranium, to control it once more, they could rebuild. But I had seen this before. Civilizations that rise too fast, that reach too far, are often the ones that fall the hardest. The Ketharii were no exception. And so, as I watched their empire unravel, I couldn't help but reflect on the broader truth that underpinned their story. The truth that has echoed through countless civilizations across the stars. Power, unchecked, always carries a cost. The Ketharii, for all their ambition, had forgotten this. They had believed that they could conquer the galaxy without consequence, that they could bend the universe to their will. But the universe does not bend easily. It has rules, and those who break them, even unknowingly, are bound to pay the price. As I drifted through the vast expanse of space, I pondered the fate of the Ketharii. They had risen to greatness, yes, but their downfall was inevitable from the moment they allowed their ambition to blind them to the consequences of their actions. Empires rise and fall, but the lessons remain the same. And so, as the stars continue their endless dance, we leave behind the Ketharii Empire, a reminder of how even the greatest powers can crumble under the weight of their own ambition. The galaxy is vast, and each story we uncover serves as a mirror, reflecting the choices we all must face, both as individuals and as civilizations. Until our next journey through the cosmic unknown, I leave you with this question. In a universe filled with boundless possibilities, will we learn from the mistakes of those who came before, or are we destined to repeat them? This is the Boltzmann Brain, signing off. Until we meet again among the stars.